Something really significant could be shifting in India's energy landscape, something with the potential to reshape not just its domestic future, but also its relationships on the global stage.
Hmm.
We're about to take a deep dive into the nuclear sector.
Yeah, and what's quite compelling about this moment is how India's, well, really ambitious energy goals are converging with a potential opening in a sector that's historically been very, very tightly held.
Right.
It touches on so many critical areas all at once.
Exactly. So today, we're unpacking a fascinating development. The Indian government seems to be seriously considering allowing foreign firms to acquire up to 49% ownership in nuclear power facilities.
Which is huge.
It is. This comes from a recent report in the Economic Times, and it's a development that could have, well, pretty far-reaching consequences.
And for you, our listener, especially if you're tracking India's economic and strategic evolution, maybe with an eye on the UPSC exams, this is a really important piece of the puzzle. It speaks directly to India's strategy for clean energy, its efforts to move beyond coal, and its dedication to lowering carbon emissions, substantially.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. For the first time, India might be opening up this sector, which has been under strict state control for decades, to significant foreign investment. That's quite a fundamental shift.
It really is.
So our mission today is to really understand the details of this potential policy change, to explore the driving forces behind it, and consider what the implications could be for India's energy future. Okay, so to get us started, where do we need to look first?
Well, I think to truly grasp the significance of this potential opening, we need to understand the current landscape, where nuclear energy in India stands right now.
Okay, the starting point.
Yeah. At present, nuclear power contributes just over 8 gigawatts to the country's electricity mix. That's about 2% of the total installed capacity.
So relatively small right now.
Relatively small, yes, though strategically important, but still a small slice of the overall energy pie currently.
And this sector has been under almost exclusive government control since. When was that act passed?
That was the Atomic Energy Act of 1960. That piece of legislation essentially placed the development and operation of nuclear facilities firmly in the hands of state-owned entities.
Right.
There weren't any provisions for private sector involvement, and certainly not for foreign ownership back then.
Okay. Now, India did sign that civil nuclear agreement with the United States back in 2008. Didn't that sort of pave the way for more international collaboration?
It did, potentially. It created the framework for significant deals with international nuclear firms. However, the subsequent Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010 introduced a layer of complexity.
The liability issue.
Exactly, particularly concerning the extent of liability in the event of a nuclear incident. And this, well, it created some hesitation among international players about making really large-scale investments.
Yeah, that makes sense. A potential sticking point for sure.
Hmm.
So bringing us to the present, what are the core elements of this proposed policy shift we're discussing? The 49% stake.
That's the headline, yes. The central aspect is considering allowing foreign companies to hold up to a 49% equity stake in nuclear power projects.
Okay.
But it's really crucial to understand this wouldn't be an automatic green light. It's not like anyone can just walk in.
No free-for-all.
Definitely not. Each instance of foreign investment would be subject to rigorous government review and approval on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so a carefully managed opening. And I believe there are potential changes to the actual laws being considered too, the legal framework itself.
Yes, that's right. The government is apparently contemplating amendments to two key pieces of legislation.
Which ones?
First is the Atomic Energy Act of 1960 itself. The idea is to revise it to explicitly permit private sector companies, including foreign entities within that 49% limit, to get involved in building, owning, and operating nuclear power plants.
Owning and operating too.
Yes, and also activities like atomic fuel mining and manufacturing. So it's a considerable broadening of what private players might be allowed to do.
Wow, that is a significant expansion for non-state actors. And what's the second law they're looking at amending?
The second is that Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010 we just mentioned.
Coming back to the liability.
Exactly. The aim here seems to be adjusting the liability provisions, perhaps to address some of those concerns that have previously deterred both foreign and, importantly, domestic private investment.
Okay.
The specifics of how they plan to change it will be absolutely critical, of course.
That sounds like a really key move to make investing in Indian nuclear projects more attractive, or at least less risky. And what's the kind of timeline we're looking at for these potential changes? Is this happening soon?
Well, according to the report, draft proposals are expected to be presented to the federal cabinet quite soon.
Okay.
And the government is apparently aiming to pass these amendments during the parliament's monsoon session, which is typically around July, so July 2025.
July 2025. So these are developments that could unfold relatively quickly then.
Potentially, yes, if the political will is there.
Okay, so things might be moving forward. Now, let's dig into the why. What are the key drivers, the strategic reasons behind this potential policy shift?
Well, if you look at India's broader commitments, the nation has set some really ambitious goals for reducing its carbon footprint.
The net zero target.
Exactly, net zero emissions by 2070. And to meet those kinds of targets, a massive expansion of clean energy sources is absolutely essential. Nuclear energy is seen as a crucial part of that strategy.
Because it's low carbon and reliable.
Yes, it's a source of power that can provide consistent low-carbon electricity, especially, as you hinted before, when you consider the intermittency of some renewables like solar and wind.
Right, you need something stable for the base load.
Precisely. Nuclear power can provide that reliable electricity needed around the clock, day and night. Furthermore, India has set this incredibly ambitious long-term goal, reaching 100 gigawatts of nuclear power capacity by 2047.
100 gigawatts, that's huge compared to the current 8 gigawatts.
It's enormous, a 12-fold increase from where we are now. And this kind of policy change, allowing more investment, is seen as pretty vital if they're serious about achieving that kind of exponential
A
growth.
12-fold increase, yeah. You're not going to get there easily with the current model alone. So this isn't just about, green energy points. It's about fundamentally scaling up India's entire nuclear power infrastructure.
Exactly. And it also opens up avenues for, well, enhanced international cooperation.
How so?
By potentially allowing foreign investment, India could deepen its partnerships with countries that have advanced nuclear technologies. Think the US, France, Russia.
All right, the established players.
Yeah. And several prominent international firms, names like Westinghouse Electric, GE Hitachi, France's EDF, Russia's Rosatom, have reportedly expressed interest.
Interest in what capacity? Building plants? Supplying tech?
Potentially all of the above. Contributing as technology providers, maybe contractors or service partners, it really depends on how the final policy shapes up.
So this could be a significant catalyst for international collaboration in energy, bringing in both know-how and maybe cutting-edge tech. Now, you also mentioned interest from Indian private companies earlier. Who are we talking about domestically?
Yes, that's another important dimension. Several major Indian private conglomerates have reportedly shown considerable interest in jumping into the nuclear power sector if these policy changes actually happen.
Like who? Any names mentioned?
Names like Reliance Industries, Tata Power, Adani Power, Vedanta, these big players have been mentioned as potential domestic investors.
Wow, those are heavy hitters.
They are. And there are even estimates floating around suggesting potential investments totaling somewhere around $26 billion from these Indian companies alone.
$26 billion. That's a huge amount of domestic capital that could be unlocked, potentially alongside foreign investment.
Exactly. It could be a powerful combination.
But with all this increased private sector involvement, foreign and domestic, what about safety? What measures will be in place to ensure everything stays under tight control? Nuclear safety is, non-negotiable.
Absolutely critical. And the government sources in the report strongly emphasize that even with this opening up, stringent regulatory oversight will absolutely continue.
Okay.
All foreign investments will still be subject to thorough, case-by-case government approvals. They're stressing that the fundamental principles of nuclear non-proliferation and the highest safety standards will remain paramount.
So safety isn't being compromised for speed or investment.
That's the message, yes. Those core principles are supposedly not up for debate.
That's a crucial reassurance.
Yeah.
Okay, so to sort of summarize this part, it looks like a strategic move by India. They want to accelerate their nuclear program to meet urgent clean energy targets and significantly boost overall power capacity. And they plan to do this through a mix of international collaboration, getting the Indian private sector involved, and attracting foreign investment, all while keeping a firm grip on safety and regulations.
That's a very accurate overview, I think, which naturally leads us to think about the potential upsides, but also the possible challenges, right? What could go wrong, or what hurdles are there?
Right. What kind of benefits might we realistically see, And what are the roadblocks they might hit?
Okay, so on the positive side, the potential benefits are pretty clear. A significant infusion of cutting-edge tech, much-needed capital, specialized expertise pouring into India's nuclear sector.
Which should speed things up.
Unquestionably. It could accelerate the pace of adding new capacity, maybe lead to more efficient project development, better operations. That's the hope.
But the challenges.
Well, first, actually getting the necessary legislative amendments through Parliament. That's never a given.
True. Political hurdles.
Then, addressing any lingering concerns around liability, even with proposed changes to the 2010 Act, building sustained confidence among big international investors on that front will be crucial.
They need clarity and certainty there.
Absolutely. And, of course, the big one. Maintaining the absolute highest levels of safety and security in what would become a more diverse operational environment with more players involved, that demands really robust, maybe even adaptive regulatory frameworks.
Yeah, managing multiple private players, some foreign, adds complexity compared to just state-owned entities. It's a complex undertaking then. Potentially big rewards, but also pitfalls if not managed really carefully.
That sums it up well.
Okay, so as we begin to wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways? What should our listeners really remember from this?
I think the essential points are these. India is actively, seriously considering allowing foreign companies to invest up to 49% in its nuclear power projects. That's the core change.
Driven by clean energy goals.
Primarily, yes. Driven by the need to meet ambitious clean energy targets, drastically expand nuclear capacity overall, and reduce reliance on fossil fuels.
And they plan legal changes to enable this.
Correct. To facilitate this, the government is planning amendments to both the Atomic Energy Act of 1960 and the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010.
Right.
And the potential impact. Well, this policy shift could significantly enhance global energy partnerships, attract substantial private investment, both foreign and domestic, and really accelerate the growth of India's nuclear energy sector, all supposedly under continued strict regulatory supervision.
Got it. And for you, our listener, especially if you're preparing for the UPSC Civil Services examination, this is a particularly relevant development, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
It intersects with crucial aspects of India's evolving energy policy, its climate change commitments, and that whole complex interplay of economics, strategy, and technology in national development. Understanding this potential policy shift will be really valuable for your surveillance. Mains answers think energy security, infrastructure, environment sections. And it could also sharpen your understanding of current affairs and international relations for the prelims exam, too.
Definitely relevant. And maybe it leaves us with a final thought for you to consider. As India potentially opens its nuclear doors wider to international participation, how will the nation strike that really delicate balance? The balance between the urgent need for rapid expansion on one hand and the absolute imperative of ensuring the highest standards of safety and security on the other.
That's a tough balancing act.
It is. And what will be the true nature, the true extent of international collaboration that's actually needed to propel India towards its big goals, energy independence and technological leadership in this really critical field?
Some really vital questions to ponder there. If you found this deep dive insightful and want to stay informed on more of these critical developments shaping India's future, please do make sure to like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment with any further questions you might have.
We'd love to hear them.
And just a reminder, our discussion today is based on that recent report in the Economic Times. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.